And we are live. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Sorry, we're a bit late. We had a small details to solve on the technical side, but now we're live. So good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome for a new interview with a member of the European Parliament. Tonight, we will discuss with MEP Alviina Alametsä from the Greens group, so on the left side of EU politics. She's 29 years old. She's actually the youngest Finnish MEP of Finland. So she's a Finnish MEP since 2019. And she's actually working in committees that we haven't seen a lot so far, because she's a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, a member in the Committee on Petitions, a member of the Subcommittee on Security and Defense, and finally a substitute in the Committee on Transport and Tourism. So it'll be quite interesting to hear a perspective on some of these issues where we don't usually see or expect to see Finnish Greens on those. But before we start our actual conversation, I just remind the house rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will stay with us for about an hour. After that, she will go enjoy the rest of her evening, while I will keep streaming for half an hour to discuss with you all about what you thought of the interview, my own interpretations of things, any other explanation that might be needed, that sort of thing. As usual, I've prepared my own questions for Mrs. Alametsä, and I also collected questions from people on Reddit, on Discord, etc. So if you're watching this on Twitch or YouTube, you can also ask your question through the chat. It's there for that. I will keep an eye on it, and I will pick among your suggestions. And if you're watching that from Twitter, well, just click on the link and come on Twitch or YouTube to ask your questions. So bottom line is, don't hesitate to participate and react, but as usual, don't spam and stay civil. So the goal of this interview is for you to better understand who your MEPs are, what they do, and understand a bit more about the EU and EU politics in general. We will not go too deep into policy discussion, and we will not touch on national politics unless it's relevant to EU politics. So keep that in mind when asking your questions. And well, without further ado, let's start the actual interview. So good evening, Alviina Alametsä. Thank you very much for taking the time of being with us tonight, especially since it's soon the weekend. So you heard me do the introduction for a couple of minutes. Did I forget anything that you would like the audience to know about you?
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for being here and inviting me. And I don't think you forgot much. No, not really. In Finland, I have been focusing before this job in the European Parliament a lot on mental health policies. And this is something I'm also continuing now. So that is something a bit beyond my committee work, something that I do. But no, I think you mentioned everything.
Well, perfect. Then, in any case, on mental health, I have a couple of questions on that, so we will definitely discuss it. Before we dive into actual policy, let's dial back a bit and talk about you. What's your story? Well, how and why did you get into politics and later became an MEP? What's your story?
Yes, well, maybe it's a bit different kind of a story as for some politicians or some members of the parliament. I was not really that politically active when I was younger, but then I had this tragedy in my school, actually. We had a school shooting when I was in the 9th grade, 15 years old. And my friend died, and I survived it, but was really left traumatized. So I had bad depression and trauma after. And then I found out that the school shooter didn't get the mental health help that he needed and that he had tried to seek for before this event. And then I wanted to actually work to prevent such things from happening in the future. So I got really excited about working for better mental health care. So this is something that led to being a candidate in municipality elections. And then I became a city councillor and pushed for some mental health clinics and initiatives. And after that, I was elected as a member of the European Parliament. So this is what happened, but that was my kind of just think. I wanted to change a concrete fact that was a really big issue in Finland.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, especially definitely not the usual story about how people become politicians. So now you're in the European Parliament. I mean, So you said that the trigger for you, the thing that pushed you to get into politics, was this tragedy that occurred in your school and related to mental health. But now you are, when you look at your committees, you are in foreign affairs, you're in defense policy. So why did you choose these committees when you came to Parliament?
Yes, well, that's actually a bit related to it as well, because I also wanted to kind of make sure that people wouldn't have to suffer so much violence. It sounds really idealistic, but because of my experiences, I was kind of identifying with those young children, especially who are in conflict areas and in the middle of war, such as now in Ukraine. So I really think that it's similar kind of violence, and even in a very much more horrible form. And this is why I went to study also not only mental health matters, but also foreign policy. And I graduated in foreign policy studies. So kind of this is something that led to these committees I have now in the parliament, that these are the two things I wanted to work on: decreasing violence also globally, and also the mental health. And I think they're quite interconnected as well.
Yeah. And so you arrived in 2019, and in 2019 we got the new commission led by Ursula von der Leyen, and Ursula von der Leyen back then nicknamed her own commission as the EU Geopolitical Commission. So now, 2 years and a half later, do you think that the commission and the EU is living up to its nickname, or it's just an empty slogan so far?
Well, at least I think that the European Union and Commission and all of these members have become a lot closer together, despite from being from different, places in Europe. I think that maybe that is at least true, that there has been a lot more unity now than in the latter years. I don't believe that the European Union has ever been as united as now, especially in face of the COVID pandemic, but also the war that we have currently in Ukraine. So I believe that, yes, von der Leyen has surely worked on that and tried to kind of make this geopolitical aspect more representative, but it's also because of answering to these crisis situations.
And speaking of crisis, I mean, if we look back at the past year, there's been a lot happening in the field of EU foreign policy. I mean, we think about the fiasco in Afghanistan. We can think about the AUKUS drama with the submarines. Now we have the war in Ukraine. So, taking all that into account, how do you think the EU foreign policy should evolve in this context?
Well, definitely, I think that we need a very united approach to that, because, if all of the member states have their own kind of voice and they're speaking separately, we are not using the strongest power we have as European Union in trade policy, diplomacy, and even, defense-wise. So I think that we have to be more united, and this is why I've been quite happy actually about the fact that in this kind of crisis situation, many people, including Vladimir Putin, would have assumed that European Union is going to be really divided, that there is going to be huge divisions and EU cannot do anything in the end. That is like the EU cliche, especially in foreign policy, that EU cannot kind of act committed and united. But this was proved wrong now. And it has taken a lot of work, especially in the sanctions and the SWIFT exclusion, and also even giving, arms help to Ukraine. But I think that it's something that many people did not expect, and I think that's a really good thing. But now what we need is even more united foreign policy, and we don't have that in every sense yet. For example, when considering the Article 42 of EU about the mutual solidarity and in security and defense, we don't really have a clear definition on that. So I hope that we could work on matters as this as well and evolve our mutual defense policy while many of the member states are in NATO, and they should also be. But I think that there is still a lot of room for improvement.
Well, I actually had a question on the mutual assistance clause of the treaty. So I think it's Article 42.7 of the treaty that says that if a European country is attacked, the other countries must provide assistance while respecting the foreign policy and defense policy of each member state. And I had a question from a Finn person who was asking, do you think that this clause, Article 42.7, so the clause of mutual assistance in the EU, should evolve to become something closer to what NATO has in Article 5, so an actual mutual defense clause where an attack on one is considered as an attack on everybody, or do you think that the current system works well?
Yes, I think the current system doesn't work because we haven't really tested those safety guarantees or the mutual assistance, or it has been tested in Paris, France once in terms of terrorism. But I think that we still haven't tested in such a situation what would happen, for example, if Russia invaded Finland. And I think, of course, I am a defender of NATO membership of Finland as well during this current time. I hope that it would happen. But I also think that we shouldn't rely in Europe only in, the United States and the leader that happens to be there at what exact point, like Trump, he was not so reliable. So I think we should also build our mutual solidarity and mutual defense. And here I think, definitely the Article 42.7 should be revised, or it should be a bit more concrete. Because, with NATO, the security guarantee is much more concrete because it's saying that every member state has to support those other states in the same way as the attack was in their borders. In EU, we don't have a definition, so it's legally unclear. And this is why it's not enough yet. We don't know how it's working in crisis situation.
And you just mentioned that you were supporting the entry of Finland in NATO, which is, I understand, quite a big debate now in Finland, in Sweden, in the context of the Ukraine war. So I initially had the question on that, on what was your position. So you already said your position, but is that a position that is shared by the Greens, whether in Finland and beyond? Because I'm French, and usually, the Greens in France, they're not very big fans of NATO, for instance. So.
Yeah, I don't think it's so shared by especially all the Greens. There is some Greens that support that kind of thinking, but I think that especially in France, there is not a shared position. In Finland, we are actually now working on it, that there will be a discussion on the NATO membership and the Greens' perspective on that. And this will happen already during this spring. So it's possible that the Greens in Finland will all kind of start supporting joining NATO, but this is still under discussion. It's not officially the party's line yet. Okay,
interesting. So you work in the, like you mentioned, you work in the subcommittee on defense. You're a Finnish, you're Nordic, you're green. Like I mentioned in the introduction, you don't exactly tick all the usual boxes of people you expect in the subcommittee on EU defense. So what does a Finnish Green think about EU defense policy?
Well, at least in these crisis times, it has been so important that we have at least one Finnish person there and in the Foreign Affairs Committee, because I'm the only one from Finland. And I think that now it's crucially important that kind of we get our voice heard in the EU politics, And I think the Finnish people are also listen quite a lot to in the parliament, because they think that they have some understanding of Russia or something. I don't concretely always understand that, because I think that the Finnish don't have always so much more understanding about what Russia is thinking. But yet, anyway, the committee members often want to hear the thoughts of the Finnish people. And I'm happy to try to represent what the Finnish government and the people want also. And mostly the Finnish people want the mutual defense and the security policy. That's really a shared goal, and I'm also working for that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So speaking of EU defense and, let's say, news, on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, the Council endorsed the so-called EU Strategic Compass, which is supposed to put forward the path for the future of EU defense in terms of strategy. And among the core proposal in the strategic compass, there is the proposal to create a 5,000 strong EU rapid deployment force. So do you think that this idea of having 5,000 soldiers under EU flag as a rapid deployment force is a real advance, or is it more of a token kind of a project?
Well, it's it's small step, but it's not enough. I think there should be a lot more kind of troops for that. And also, I really hope that we could discuss like not only such kind of a troop that is for foreign assistance, but can we have some shared troops inside European Union more, to act if there is a crisis situation inside our borders a bit better. So I think that there is a lot more to be done. And, with the strategic compass, I was not so happy about it because I think that it is a good steps forward. But as you said, there is a bit of tokenism. So it should be even more, progressive in terms of security and defense policy and kind of making it more complete. And also it has a bit of issues like, for example, it frames immigration and refugees as the major security threat to Europe, while at the same time we are now welcoming 10 million Ukrainian refugees, and all the politicians are saying that they are welcome here, but at the same time in the strategic compass we are saying that they are a major threat to our security. So I think it's a bit, the document is already a bit outdated, I must say.
Okay. I have a question in the chat about the rapid reaction force. Do you think that the council is flexible enough in terms of decision making to actually make use of this rapid reaction force? Because we know that there is the so-called EU battle groups that were created since 2007, but they have never been deployed because there has never been consensus among the member states to actually use these soldiers. So do you think that there will be a change in the decision making, or is it the 5,000 soldier will amount to nothing without the change of the decision making?
Yeah, this is like one of the big issues that you mentioned. Thank you for this question from the chat. Definitely that, there was a rapid reaction force already. So I have been kind of puzzled, like, why do we need another one? But apparently the last one has not been reactive enough. And there has been some changes now to the rules that will like, make it possible to react faster and easier. So I guess that's the only difference there. So I think that in the first place, the EU made actually this kind of troops that actually were not suitable for purposes. We noticed this in Afghanistan, that it was impossible for EU to send really fast troops on the ground at the first place. So yes, I think that now this is an evolvement, but this is like one thing in the EU politics. You should do things correctly in the first time. Now you have to fix them like later, to make the rules more flexible and so on.
Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, if we look at the EU in terms of defense, and especially the push to make a geopolitical EU, when it comes to defense, can the EU actually become a credible military or defense actor? Well, I mean, globally, given when you look at the member states, I mean, apart from France that has like a strong army and a strong defense, you have much smaller armies in the EU, and you also have a very different foreign policy and defense policy. We have countries that are relative pacifists. We have countries that are neutral. So how is it possible to combine all that and have an actual EU military power?
Well, this is actually a really great question that is quite rarely asked. I think this is also like one of the main issues behind the problems of the strategic compass, for example, because, there are so many different kind of hopes and wishes from the member states that they find it really hard to put them together. So this is like the core question. But what we see now is a really major change to this because of the Ukrainian crisis and the attack of Putin there. So we already see that EU is more willing to use our power and our force than before. So I think that this is something that could predict a better navigation and better cooperation in other areas of security policy as well. Because we find that even when there is such a situation of crisis, then, we can find shared value base. Most of the countries in the beginning would not have imagined to support, for example, arms export to Ukraine. And now everybody basically supports that. So I think that it is like major developments that are happening. So I'm hopeful for the future as well.
I have another question from the chat that relates to NATO. So the question is, do you think that do you share the opinion that the EU would be pretty much defenseless if NATO was not around, or do you think that is a view that is exaggerated and that the EU could defend itself even if NATO was not there?
Good question. You know, if we didn't have NATO, it's like it's a kind of this thinking game. What would happen? We have only theories. We don't know. It is possible that all of these countries would really read the Article 42.7 in a very literal term and be very, kind of committed to that. And that would mean that the EU would have a strong defense union. But we don't have any guarantee on that, in the same way that we have with NATO. So this is like the issue. So I think that, of course, EU is strong in that sense already, that we have such a great economic power that is big, compared to our size. It's a big economic power that we have. And this is also like something that should not be neglected. But in terms of military power, it's difficult because the decision making would probably be like very dependent on the states and what they agree on. Probably if there would be attack to Europe without NATO membership of any country, probably France and Germany and others would already quite fastly make the kind of thinking that okay, we have to support our neighbors because otherwise the European economy will have issues and everything, the security will have issues. But we are not so sure about that as we are with NATO because of the legal guarantee.
And still on defense, probably final question on defense. Something that we often hear when we talk about defense in the EU, we heard that back during the Brexit, and something that comes up often, is the idea of an EU army. So do you believe that there could be an EU army one day?
Yes, why not? I don't think it's impossible, but I don't think it's going to be tomorrow. But all of these crises that are happening around are really making Europe more united. And I think that there is a much more political opening to such EU army questions even now, especially, after Brexit, because Great Britain was one of the strongest kind of forces trying to push back from the defense and security cooperation. So now that they are gone, there is maybe a bit more, similar understanding of where it could go. But I don't think it's going to happen like tomorrow, but I think maybe in some decades it's possible.
And so you already said it a few months ago, it would have been unthinkable to have unity in the EU for delivering weapons to a country at war, and now it's every country is supporting that. So I understand that you tend to support this decision, but we also hear like concerns in the different member states that by delivering weapons to Ukraine, it could make the EU a legitimate target for Russia. And Russia had already said, oh, careful, anyone who delivers weapons to Ukraine will be a legitimate target for Russia.
Yeah, but of course, you have to put that into context in a way that well, what I'm a bit suspicious about is, for example, the no-fly zone that has been, proposed by Ukraine. I have generally supported all of those petitions and ideas that Ukraine has given us. I have met a lot with the parliamentarians, but for that one, it's a bit different because it would really involve NATO and NATO member states in a war and kind of, shooting down Russian planes. Mm-hmm. So it's different than, just providing arms to Ukraine. Now we see that kind of, those threats of something horrible happening to those countries that, support Ukraine with selling them arms or giving them arms. Not happened so much. So there is no attack from Russia to any other countries at the moment, and I think that it would be in a quite high barrier for Russia to attack, especially NATO member countries.
Yes,
I don't believe in that happening right now.
And speaking of Ukraine, one of the ways, so everyone of course is looking for way out of the conflict, and one solution that was pushed forward at some point by Russia and others was the idea of a Finlandization of Ukraine, so the idea of forcing neutrality on Ukraine. As a Finn, do you think that a Finnish scenario for Ukraine would be a realistic and good solution out of the conflict or not?
That's really for the Ukrainians to decide of what they want to do. I understand that this might be an option at some point, to have a bit more, to preserve your identity and your country in some way, but still be on the leash of Russia. it's not a seductive option, but it's better than war for some people. So I wouldn't like judge anyone for choosing that kind of option. But for Finland, at least, it was quite bad for our country for a long time. You know, we were not able to say anything directly to Russia, and we were always concerned about what Russia could do or say. And you know, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Finland had this opening to join, EU, to join different international organizations. Also, Finland could have joined NATO at that point, but didn't, because even if the Soviet Union and the power of Soviet Union had collapsed, the Finnish politicians were still afraid of Russia. So even if it was really weak after that, for a while, they wouldn't join NATO or do all of these other things. And this is something that kind of the Finlandisering does to people, that, you know, you are not, you cannot make your rational choices. So I do not wish that for Ukraine. I hope that they would find another solution.
Okay. And I'm looking at if I missed any question on Ukraine. Chat, if you want a question on Ukraine, now is the time. Then we're going to switch to other topics on mental health, which is another topic that we don't discuss often, but that is equally important. I don't see anything right now, so I will switch. If anything pops up, I will come back. So you mentioned as well that you work on mental health, especially given the reason why you first got into politics. So concretely, what do you do at EU level to on mental health?
Yes, well, for example, today we submitted this proposal for the Commission to make a pilot project and a study for open mental health clinics. You know, in Helsinki, when I started out as a city councillor, I made this proposal to just have some open clinics in the city where anybody can walk in and get short-term psychotherapy treatment of like 10 times or so, with no money, with no cost whatsoever, and no like waiting in lines. Because in Finland, the situation is hard. You have to wait for like 1 hour, 1 year even to get any psychotherapy. So I made this proposal, and after a few years, we managed to push it through, and now we have 3 clinics in Helsinki, and we just opened the 4th. And it's working amazingly. It's really good for, you know, treating mental health issues and also like preventing them from being worse, like preventing suicide. And so we made a proposal for the Commission that they could fund such initiative all over Europe and research, you know, what are the implications of that. And we are trying to do it this way because, as you know, the EU does not have a shared competence on mental health issues. So this is why we have to push everything through, like, you know, different studies and science and different projects. But also we have tried to work a lot for the working life mental health, because work life is something that EU has competence for.
And still on mental health, we saw that during the pandemic, there was a lot of mental health issues, particularly among the younger people who were stuck in small apartments and all that. So it's been quite documented that we've seen a rise in mental health issues over the past couple of years. Do you think that even if the EU doesn't have the shared competence on this, do you think that the EU can do something to help member states counter this, or at least treat this rise in mental health issues?
Yes, definitely. I think that, for example, in the beginning of the pandemic, we also made a proposal to have like a short-term psychotherapy distantly, you know, with a video or mobile phone. The Commission rejected that because they didn't see it as relevant. And now I'm thinking like, yeah, that could have been a good thing to do, you know, to prevent the future harm for people who do not get the mental health service when they need it, but they didn't want to do it. So, you know, whatever, but we are still working on such things. And I think that especially now after the pandemic has been finishing, or at least I hope it finishes.
Fingers crossed.
I think it's very important. Yeah, exactly. So I hope that it's very important that the member states and the Commission also would now realize that now is the time to kind of protect the mental health and, you know, kind of repair some damage that has been done during this pandemic, because for young people it's major.
And you mentioned as well mental health in the workplace, and we know especially that for Nordic countries, there's a lot of emphasis done on the work-life balance. Do you think that the fact that during the pandemic, and we know that it's going to continue after the pandemic, that we will use more and more home office, distance working, do you think it will have a positive or a negative impact on mental health?
It might have, like both impacts. I think it's not like neither or. For example, it might be good for some people to be able to, reduce some time of transportation between workplace and home. Maybe you have more time for family or things like this. But considering, for example, how we work with our devices, we know from research that most of young people who work in professions where you work mostly with your phone or your computer, most of them check their emails even in the evening and do not consider that as work. So we have this issue that we are kind of working easily 24/7 without realizing it. And this is why I think it's really, really good that we managed to pass the directive of the right to disconnect, so that everybody should be able to like turn off their phone after the work hours. There is no like this kind of the need for people to be all the time accessible, and that your boss can call you at any hour. So I think that's really important, and that's something we should implement in the European Parliament as well, because we have serious issues, as you know, there's serious issues with some of the members. They treat the people who work there so badly. So I think that the directive is good, but also people should start from their own workplace.
True. I can confirm that. Before we move on to the next topic, I would like to discuss a bit about the minimal wage that you mentioned in the introduction. I had a question on, let's say, the conflict, Ukraine conflict in the chat. So the person is concerned about the rise of the far right that could be caused by the war in Ukraine and the tension with Russia and all that, and also because of the economic consequences of the sanctions that the EU and the West in general is taking against Russia. We see the rise in the price of energy and all that. So do you think it could lead to more far right, more populism, and how should the EU contribute to prevent such a rise of the far right in times of crisis?
Again, a very smart intellectual question from the chat. Thank you. Well, I think that it's, yes, definitely there is a possibility of the far right rising. As we noticed already in the COVID pandemic, in the beginning, I think that people were quite united, like there was a mutual risk, there was a mutual danger, and people were kind of, okay, let's do this together. And I think for a moment, people were more united. But then came the far right politicians and activists who also kind of took advantage of the situation. And they kind of started, saying, for example, that COVID is a hoax and, you shouldn't put vaccines, and that is only, well, you know what happened. So I think that it's possible during a risk situation that people kind of abuse it to get their own political message heard, and kind of try to address those fears of people to like bring about some conspiracy theories and so on. So that's something I'm really concerned about, actually. What we can do about it, I think one of the most important things is actually what you mentioned already a bit about the income and, about the possibility for people to live their ordinary life. Because if, the governments leave people alone at the time of crisis and they do not give any additional, mental, but also money support, then there is major issue that it might happen that these people turn against the government and the people that they work with and so on. So I think it's important to make sure that the situation is fair for everyone, because if you are ripped of all of your basic human rights and basic rights because of raising those prices of accommodation and food, that makes you feel so unfair that it's a really good kind of ground for all kind of aggression.
I have another question from the chat, this time on mental health. So we know that the EU is pouring help to Ukraine right now in the conflict, but we know as well that the EU will help Ukraine to rebuild after the conflict. Do you think that the part of the EU help that is provided to Ukraine should cover mental health issues, or whether a fund, whether a project or something, because of course the war will have tremendous effects, and we already see that with the Ukrainian refugees arriving in Europe, with people having PTSD and that sort of thing. So should the EU also help the mental health of Ukraine after the war?
Yes, definitely. And I think that's also a core thing for those people who come as refugees. So if they have to stay here for a long time and kind of adapt to the societies in Europe, I think that what people need really is also like mental support, and we should have that, and we should offer everybody who is in need a treatment for PTSD. I had it as well, so I know it's a horrible thing. You cannot sleep and so on. It's really bad. So I do think that EU should support that people get all the treatment they need, and I'm willing to work for that as well. Really good point.
And now moving on to the question of minimal EU income, something that you work on, and that the EU has been working on, struggling with actually for quite a while. And we've seen a number of different positions. We know that the Nordic countries tend to be resisting the idea of a EU minimal income, not because they don't want people to have a minimum income, but because they are afraid that either their own national system would be downgraded because of the EU rules, or because it would threaten the model that the Nordic countries have, because they're not, if I'm not mistaken, in a number of these countries, the minimal income is not fixed by law, but through negotiation with the union. So where do you stand on this?
Yes, well, I think that often this kind of argument is made actually from those parties and those people who really don't support kind of minimum income for people. And kind of, I think that it's very important to note that there are a few different things. First of all, you can continue that kind of a negotiation model you have in Finland, and at the same time have a legal guarantee for like what kind of income it should be. It's not a maximum income, it's a minimum income. So you can build on that. And I definitely don't think that, having this kind of legal framework for a minimum, which we already have in the Nordics in a way, having that in everywhere in Europe would be a bad thing. I think that it would just support the workers' rights. But, many people say this argument because they don't support giving out any power of social questions to the European Union. And this is like the core issue. There are so many people and politicians who do not really support helping the people who are extremely poor or have very bad working conditions. They do not support that. They are not focused on such a topic, and they don't want to give any power to EU on that because they are afraid that would be fixing those social inequalities that we have. So there is often this idea of not having competence for social and health matters is often rooted in the thinking that you don't actually want EU to have any competence because you don't support that kind of a model. You don't support this kind of a leftist thinking of a welfare state.
And if we take the opposite argument, this time more from Eastern countries, they see the idea of EU minimum wage as a threat to, let's say, their competitive advantage. They say, oh, well, if we are forced to raise our salaries, then, we don't have any competitive edge when competing with Western countries. So how do you answer to this criticism from the opposite criticism?
Well, I don't know. I think that, the minimum income should not be necessarily the same everywhere. It can be, related to the cost of living and so on. You can count this kind of an index there. So I don't think that it should be like the same everywhere, of course. So that would fix the issue a little bit. And then also there is a really relevant argument about how to make it more equal for people who are also not employed, because everybody is not working in a working life, but they still would deserve good income, or at least an income to live their lives. So I also support the combination of universal basic income and the minimum income. So I think that would guarantee a lot more better economic situation for most people, and especially it would be important for ending homelessness in Europe and so on. So I think this is a combination of many political measures that kind of combine to each other.
And given that the file has been difficult, if not stuck, for quite some time, do you think that it will there is ways for compromise, or it will stay stuck like that for the time being?
Well, for now, I think that yes, it has been stuck, and whether it moves forward is only, the question of the politicians. But there is a strong lobbying against that as well. So I'm quite
We lost Alviina.
is such a
Oh, hi chat. I lost you for a second, so could you bring back the video and repeat what you were saying, please?
Hi, I'm sorry. Somebody called me and this cut me off.
So, no problem. No
I'm
problem.
here. Yeah. So maybe you can hear me.
Yeah, now you're back.
Amazing, great. So yeah, what I was just saying was that I hope that they will figure out some kind of a compromise, because the income is such a crucial question for people, and especially now after COVID, there are so many people who are suffering from poverty and don't have, money for basic food and medication and so on, even if they're working 2-3 jobs. So this has to be fixed, really.
Okay, and now let's talk about your perspective. You are the youngest Finnish MEP around. How is your perspective on EU politics as someone who is young? Do you think that the EU politics is modern enough, or is it like too stuck in the past and it should evolve?
Yes, well, I think it should evolve, of course. I hope really that the EU policy would be, first of all, listening more to young people, and not even young people, but just the citizens. I think it's sometimes really far away from the citizens, and this is like an issue. But especially, for example, in answering to climate crisis and such things, I think that the EU is listening often a lot more to lobbyists than actually activists and scientists and so on. So I really hope that there would be change in this. And as a young person, I think that especially in those topics that affect the young people in the future, this should be the case, because all of those politicians who are now like not so much caring about climate change, they will not be here when the consequences are hitting us, because they are hitting worse in some decades, and some politicians are not alive anymore. So it's easier to make decisions that are not so, fast or so strong. But for the young people, it would be important to make like better and faster decisions. And well, I think also in terms of, the competencies, I really hope that EU could figure out the human rights principle, not only, in the way that it now is, but also more concretely in terms of food and housing and so on, and mental health. I think that's what the young people also want, and that's what the research also just suggests.
And speaking of consulting, of listening to citizens, right now we have the conference on the future of Europe, which is soon going to be closed. So it's this big consultation process that lasted for now a bit more than a year. Do you think that this is a good exercise? Is it a token exercise? What do you think about it?
It kind of depends on what the politicians make of it, because I think that there is some really good proposals, and there has been really good proposals from the citizens. But, the issue is whether the politicians will take that into action or not. So I think that's depending on it so much.
And speaking of what politicians will make of it, there is a strong fear that actually the council, so the member state, will actually sit on or put in a drawer the proposal of citizens, and that he could create like the contrary of what the conference was supposed to do. So he will create actually a backlash against the EU, because the citizens will say, "Wow, we worked for a year for that, and then in the end you put everything in a drawer." So do you think that the EU and the process, we might have been over-promising or building too much expectation, bearing in mind that the council might sabotage the whole thing?
Yeah, you're right. I hope they will not, but that is really a legitimate risk. And I definitely think that, we have to make sure then at the political level and media level, so that these initiatives are not forgotten, and bring political pressure. because I myself, for example, made one successful citizen initiative in Finland and pushed that forward to the legal work of the parliament and so on. And in that I learned that you need political pressure. If you don't have political pressure, politicians will just sit on it and do nothing. So that's something that it's still left for the citizens and media to build as well, and not only the politicians. And so we should all raise attention to those most important subjects that there are for our opinion.
I have another question from the chat. Actually, quite interesting. We've seen a number of big issues being pushed forward thanks to crisis. Well, because of crisis. We know that on climate change issue advanced a bit because it was pushed by Greta Thunberg. The EU defense and EU foreign affairs kind of policies moving forward because of Ukraine. Do you think there is enough momentum right now on this topic, on whether it's climate change or EU defense / foreign affairs, or do you think that it will take another crisis to move even further?
I think now there is good momentum for the security and defense. And there's also some momentum for health union, because of COVID. But for climate crisis, not yet. No, there is no. And, in my opinion, I don't really understand what the issue is there. Maybe because climate crisis is not like a very dramatic attack on some country, but it's a threat that's going to eat us all alive, in some decades. So maybe the politicians don't take it so seriously because they don't see it with their eyes. They don't see the footage of, those houses that are being bombarded in Ukraine. So the climate crisis is maybe less concrete, and this is why there is a lot of lack still in the political action and in concrete goals. EU is doing, especially in the European Parliament, has been now a bit more progressive, but especially in some member states and globally, there is major issues.
And still on this idea of different priorities, climate change, foreign affairs, and all that. Sometimes we can see those priorities clash to an extent. So we've seen, because of the war in Ukraine, a lot of concerns on the food sovereignty of the EU. We're worried about, will there be hunger in the world because of the war in Ukraine? And so we have seen, for instance, on the farmer side, push saying, we need to put at least in the fridge for the time being the efforts to make the EU greener, or to like, for instance, the farm to fork initiative that's supposed to make agriculture greener, because it will actually threaten the food supply. And so how do you deal with this kind of tension between, on one end, like the overarching like objective of fighting climate change, but also like the more immediate concerns due of the war in Ukraine with food security, that sort of thing?
Yeah, now this is an excellent situation for all of those fossil fuels and agriculture lobbyists to say that we don't have to change anything because now is crisis time and we need to do the old thing and that's how it works. And it's completely false. It's a lie. Because, if you look at the food production, for example, if we would turn to a more green food production, I mean, putting a bit more emphasis on plants and plant-based food, for example, that is so much more efficient in terms of land use, water use. And in this current situation, it's so much more efficient than this current meat production. So, I don't think we have to maybe push the meat production down entirely. But if we want to really be prepared for a crisis situation, the most efficient way to feed people is with the plant-based diet. So I think that's exactly what we need now, and we would need a lot more resources for that. And, but there are the same companies that lobbied that against the agriculture reform, saying that it's not relevant, and, putting like a kind of this business as usual focus there. The same kind of companies are now saying that, yes, this is now an excuse not to do anything. And that shouldn't be listened, because it's quite the contradiction of that.
I'm looking in the chat if I missed any question. Well, actually, I see just a question coming up. So the person in the chat is Romanian, with a government that's suffering from a lot of long-time corruption in the country. It's Romania, especially because of the pandemic. Do the Greens have proposals to combat corruption at state level? He knows that there is a European chief prosecutor, but that's mostly for EU funds. But beyond that, what is the EU doing against corruption?
Yeah, great question from Romania, and I definitely the Greens have very strong theme in how to fight against corruption. And I'm not an expert on that, but what I know from the goals is that we, of course, need to have a more observation of how to use the EU funds, for example, because those are also being misused. But the Greens would go even a lot further and have more strict requirements of how to end corruption in the member states. That it would not only be surveilling how you use the EU funds, but also how you act as a member state in general. And then you have sanctions if you are, letting your citizens down by such amount of corruption. So I think that it has to be supervised and measured and then sanctioned if there is such corruption. And there is so much corruption everywhere in Europe. So I think that we need to work on that a lot. But hey, I think I have to finish quite soon. Maybe you still have something. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions, and then I will. You'll be free. So first question: if you could change anything about the EU and the way EU politics is being done, what would you change and why?
First of all, I would listen a lot more to the citizens. That is like a core thing. I would really want EU to have the same kind of citizen initiative mechanism that we have, for example, in Finland, that everybody can bring their initiative to the plenary and to like the decision making of EU. Now they have such a mechanism, but it's so hard that it's never used. It's too hard threshold for the citizens. So I think that would change a lot of things. We need more direct democracy in EU as well.
And final question, where do you stand on the debates about the federal European Union? Do you support it? Are you against it? On the fence?
I support it at least to some context, but I'm quite a federalist myself, I must say, because I think that EU is a lot stronger if we act together. If all of the member states act alone, they are a lot more weaker in terms of the global politics as well. And now, apparently, it seems that we are entering a new era of power politics. So I think that EU has to be united and strong as well to, middle in between all of these other big countries and to preserve our own values of human rights and so on. So I think that we need to fight for democracy, human rights, and a more united European Union.
Well, that's very clear. So thank you very much, Alviina Alametsä, for your time and answering our questions tonight. Chat, make sure to thank her. You can follow her on Twitter. You see the ad under her video feed. Miss Alametsä, thanks again for taking the time. I hope we will see you in the future on the channel and on a future occasion. And well, I wish you a good evening and a good weekend.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be interviewed by such a celebrity, as I told you in the first place. Very famous in the EU circle. So thank you all for great questions as well, and see you later.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Let's start the debriefing, guys. Tell me everything of what you thought and all that. Well, in the meantime, I am taking my notes and closing Zoom and meeting for all. Thanks for the follow. So, interesting interview, I have to say. A number of things I was not expecting at all. But yeah, that's good. That's why we do these interviews to be challenged ourselves sometime in our pre-consideration. Okay, now tell me about the famous Article 42. Okay, so let's start it. So in the EU treaties, and actually let me first change page because I anticipated things for this interview. There you go. So that's the Treaty of the European Union. In the article, in this treaty, so this is the article on common security and defense policy, you have Article 42.7. And this article is basically telling what is supposed to happen in the EU if a member state was to be attacked militarily by another country or any kind of armed aggression, actually. So let's take an example. If Russia was to invade Finland, currently that's Article 42.7 that would trigger. And this article is saying that in this case, let's say Finland is attacked by Russia, the other member states, so the other 26 countries, should help Finland, but it's relatively blurry. That's kind of the criticism that was made by the MEP during the interview. Is saying, well, it's pretty blurry as to what it means legally, especially if you look at the very end of it. This shall be without prejudice to specific security and defense policy of central member states. So, for instance, if you have a country that is neutral, like Austria, what does it mean? That means that they cannot military help because they are neutral. They cannot provide military aid to Finland. If you take Hungary, let's say Hungary, let's say take like the worst case scenario. Let's say Hungary decide, oh well, actually, maybe the Finnish deserve that, so we're not going to help that because that would threaten our links with Russia, and that's part of our security and defense policy, etc., etc. So that's the criticism that is being made to Article 42.7, that it's too weak. And so that's what she had the question about that, and she confirmed that she was in favor of that. It would be to have something closer to the wording that exists to the rule that is in NATO. In NATO, it's the Article 5, and the Article 5, to summarize, is if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. Which means that in this case, no matter what is your specific foreign affairs policy, your security and defense policy, if one of your allies is attacked, you have a duty to answer as if you were invaded yourself. So that's the big difference. I hope I made it clear. Let me know if it's clear, or if I need to dive a bit further into that. And also the interesting thing in this Article 42.7 is the second part, because you have a direct reference to NATO. Because it says that, of course, and here you see that in this article, in fact, it embodies all the problems, or all the issues with the EU defense policy as it stands. Why? Because on the first hand, you have, because of this part, the idea that, well, a neutral country or country that has a different security and defense policy would not be obliged to help another European country as much as it should. And then, so that's, let's say, the neutral country. And then you have this part, which is about NATO. And the problem there, is that when we talk about EU defense, especially when you listen to the French are very keen on having an EU defense policy. Macron has been pushing that left, right, and center. He wants a sovereign independent EU defense, and he doesn't. He wanted it initially to be completely independent from NATO, because he was saying NATO is brain dead. It's under EU. It's under American domination. I mean, if you remember the Trump years, Trump was like, oh well, I don't feel committed to defend a NATO country from an attack. So. Yeah, this reference, you have a problem with NATO, and on the opposite side, you have countries that rely entirely on NATO. If you take Eastern countries, Poland, the Baltic state, etc., for them, NATO is the best defense that they have. So for them, their answer is, why should we alienate ourselves from NATO for the sake of making an artificial or a pretty virtual EU defense? What protects us from Russia is not the EU defense, it's NATO. It's the fact that the Americans are there that protects us. It's not there. So that's why you have direct references to NATO to basically say whatever common security and defense policy the EU may have, it cannot go against or circumvent NATO. NATO remains the core of EU defense. For at least for its members. Not all member states are part of NATO. For instance, Sweden and Finland are not part of NATO. Reading this makes it very clear to me that this article is a wet towel. I mean, it's very theoretical. Like she said, it's only been implemented, so to say, once. When France was at the terrorist attacks in 2015, France called for the application 42.7 to get help from the other member state, but it was to an extent, fortunately, the EU never had to face a concrete invasion of its territory. And to an extent, again, because of of NATO, the fact that EU defense and NATO can overlap a bit, you have some are arguing, well, why do we need a specific EU defense policy? Because you have NATO. So since most EU member states are part of NATO, if the EU is invaded, then the US will intervene as part of NATO. So that's kind of this the difficulty around the EU common defense policy is the question of NATO. How do you make it work with or in a compatible way to NATO? For example, Germany could claim risking being cut off Russian gas as a security threat to it and deny support. Indeed, that's exactly what I was explaining for taking the opposite example about Hungary. But you're right, it could be an argument that is being raised. Politically, that would be completely unsustainable. That would be political suicide, and basically that would mean de facto the end of the EU. But you're right. The fact that there is no legal obligation, or at least a legal loophole that can be used. But on the other end, let's say that even if you had a strong EU, well, let's say an equivalent of Article 5 of NATO in the EU treaties, Germany could still decide at the last moment, well, actually, I don't want to apply this. That would basically tank their credibility and all that, but you'll never, if the country really doesn't want to do something, they won't do it, no matter what the texts are saying. But again, at this stage, it's pretty theoretical. I mean, the MEP Alametsä said that it's pretty unrealistic at the moment that that Russia would invade the EU or a NATO country, because that basically, given that, especially now, given that how much they struggle against Ukraine, I don't see them taking aid on the US or the EU for that matter. But anyway. It was, and you're right, it was pretty unrealistic that Russia would invade Ukraine. You are right. I mean, you're especially right because myself, back then, if you remember during the press, the news review a couple of months ago, myself, I was thinking it was unreal. I didn't think that Russia would invade Ukraine. So you're right. You're perfectly right. That being said, invading Ukraine and invading the EU, it's a completely different kind of beast. Because you would have NATO, you would have the question of the use of nuclear weapons, so it's still a different kind of threshold. That never underestimate the stupidity of a zealous dictator. I don't think it's a matter of stupidity. I think that it's a matter of underestimating what dictators are willing to do to stay in power. That's the one thing you should not underestimate. But that being said, I do believe that that Putin, and let's be honest, most of us underestimated greatly Ukraine and overestimated greatly the Russian army. So there was a misconception all around. All right. Let's see. In the meantime, if I have any other points. Well, I do have other points. Actually, let me switch that. So that's the other thing we discussed: the strategic compass. I mean, in Brussels we have a gift to choose weird names for stuff. So yeah, basically it's the strategic paper of the EU. So it was adopted It was endorsed by the council, so by the member state on Tuesday, and so it's a quite long document. It's 64 pages. I have not read it completely. I just read the executive summary. But yeah, it's a mix between token ambitions and actual strategic references, because. What is for certain is that this document has been heavily reviewed following the invasion of Ukraine. There's, let me check. Russia. Russia is mentioned everywhere in the document, which was obviously not the case before. I mean, yeah, you have specific reference to Ukraine. China is also identified as as a potential rival. But yeah, you have Russia all over the place. 25 occurrence of Russia in the text to be exact. Let's see, compare with China. China only 9. So yeah, the whole thing has been redone quite heavily following the Ukraine invasion, and like she mentioned, there's a link to the strategy compact pin to the Reddit. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. In any case, up. Give me a sec. There you go. You also have the link there, the direct link. What was I saying? Probably something interesting. Yes, I was saying that the thing that is not touched upon, at least from what I saw in the document, is the question of the decision making. So, like I mentioned during the interview, we have since 2007 what is called EU battle groups. What is a EU battle group? Is supposed to be I got other yeah, indeed. The battle groups are basically soldiers that are mostly French and German, that can be mobilized by the EU if needed. I don't recall the exact number. Actually, let me check. EU battle group number. EU battle group, 18 battle groups. Okay, so 1,500 per battle group. There is 18 of them. So that's almost 30,000. Yeah, almost 30,000 soldiers in these battle groups, but they have never been deployed. Is there since 2007? They've never been deployed. I think you could argue that since 2007, there's been a few things that happened where you could have said, oh, well, maybe EU soldiers could be deployed. Afghanistan, the different terrorist attacks, etc., etc. They were never deployed. Why? Because there has never been consensus in among the member states. Because to deploy these battle groups, you need unanimity. Means that all the member states need to agree that the EU soldiers must be deployed. Now the question is, we have this fancy new reaction force of 5,000 soldiers, but what about the decision making? Because if it's still requiring unanimity to be deployed, why would it be more easy? Why would it be deployed any more than the battle groups have been deployed? So, that's kind of the big question when it comes to one of the big questions when it comes to EU defense and foreign affairs policy. Let me catch up on the chat. Russia is an unfriendly country. I think we can agree on that. Not mentioned a lot is focused on naval power in the context of the EU NAVFOR in Somalia. So yeah, the EU NAVFOR, for those of you who don't know, is a military operation of the EU that is aimed at securing the trade routes in Somalia, basically to fight against piracy in Somalia. More active in protecting its interest in the globe. The other thing that is pretty new, and I saw that somewhere, there is something about space. Growing presence in sea and space. So they want to do something specific. Space is everywhere. Outer space. Let's see what they say about outer space. No, you don't want? Okay, fine. I keep saying the PR team of EU NAVFOR, great team. They post video. I never checked the NAVFOR kind of communication. Let's see if I can find it somewhere. Where is the table of content? Okay. Hybrid, cyber. Okay. Strategic domain. That could be in strategic domain. Let's see. Cyber space. All right. Access to space domain. Prepare to more competitive and contested space environments. Dependency on space system and services. We are more vulnerable to responsible and threatening behaviors by strategic competitors. So that's China and Russia, without naming them. Growing number of objects in orbit and space debris, also increasing the risk of and tension, indeed, because when you have That's something we discussed in a couple of interviews with MEPs. When you have a lot of debris in the space in space, because it's either satellites that are dead, because you have satellites that have been destroyed, remains of something, etc., etc. These things are dangerous because they prevent, they travel at several kilometers per second. So, of course, if you get hit by one of those space debris, you're not going to like it. If you've seen Gravity, you know what I mean. And it's actually creating a lot of problem, because places where there is debris, you cannot have something launched there. So that makes it more difficult for the EU or for any country around the world to have a space policy, because that means it's more difficult to get to space because of the debris, and it's kind of an exponential thing. The more you go to space, the more there is debris. The more more difficult it is to get to space. And EU is working now quite a bit on trying to finding ways to clean up space, on how to get rid of this kind of debris. There's a thing that they map them and they follow them so that they know exactly where those debris are, but they're also working on projects along with NASA and other space agency to try to capture the space debris and destroy them or get rid of them, and at least making sure that they're not going to pollute space. But yeah, anyway. EU space program, blah blah blah. Key services, so imagine that they're talking about Galileo there. We will work on the proposal for EU space-based global secure communication system, including through the Union Secure Connectivity Program. Okay, so it's just security. EU space assets are under civil control. Indeed, the question of militarization of space is kind of a taboo. Okay. There is a pressing need to complement the current space strategy and then security and defense mentioned in space. EU space strategy for security and defense. What? Did I say something wrong, Snow? Yeah, let's build a common understanding of space-related risk and threats. Yeah. No, I'm not saying that it's useless. I'm not saying that that's not what I meant. Probably react faster, better to crisis, strengthen our resilience. Or the usual blah blah. I mean, actually, there's quite a bit about space. There's another paragraph: space situational awareness. Space-based risk, threat and vulnerabilities, strengthen the dual-use innovation, invest in capability development in order to benefit from autonomous access to space. Okay, protect space supply chain. Okay. Let's see what else. Right, pretty much a lot of blah blah for now. Common approach on space traffic management. Okay, building upon the joint communication from the Commission High Representative. Okay. Present space assets. Identify necessary means to address vulnerability to react quickly and firmly to space-related threats. Okay. But quite a... I mean, what, 3 paragraph on space? I mean, that's more than cyber. I mean, cyber probably has its own thing. But yeah. Yeah, air only has 1, maritime has only 1. Yeah, okay. Anyway, moving on. Otherwise, we're going to stay there for quite some time. What did we talk about? EU minimal wage. I think she explained pretty much the issues there, so I don't see any kind of advance on that front, because of the let's say the status quo between the Nordic countries that do not want it because they want to protect their own model, the Eastern countries that do not want it because they want to save their, let's say their competitive advantage, and the West, well, cyberspace our own EU OnlyFans, hopefully. How do you link cyberspace and EU OnlyFans? Okay, sorry, cyberspace. I was still on space policy. I was like, why would OnlyFans be in space? I don't get it. But no, cyberspace, that makes a bit more sense. Conference on Future of Europe. We haven't done yet the stream to go through the proposals from citizens. I will try to find a slot in April to do that, to go through like all the panels of all those citizens panels have given their recommendations. So I'd like to make a stream to read through them and give our assessment on what we think of these proposals from citizens on what the EU should do. But yeah, in any case, the big question mark is what will the council do with it? I do not think that they will do everything that the citizens are proposing. So I mean, wait and see. But I think that I would say that I'm among those who think that the EU may have overpromised with the Conference on Future of Europe. But anyway, and the rest we discussed. NATO we discussed, strategic compass we discussed. No-fly zone we didn't discuss it, but I think it's pretty clear. I mean, the Ukraine is pushing. It's a big ask. They want a no-fly zone. So no-fly zone is basically you have a let's say a coalition of countries that say, okay, this specific airspace is forbidden. No one is allowed to fly in it. If you fly in it, we shoot you down. That's what Ukraine has been asking, because that means that the Russian would not be allowed to able to do airstrikes or to have maintain their air power in Ukraine. Actually the EU and most countries of the West are opposed to the idea of a no-fly zone. Why? Because declaring that no one is allowed to fly above Ukraine is one thing. Then you have to enforce it, and of course Russia would say, "Screw you! I don't respect your no-fly zone." But if they do that, that means that you have to Western the West, France, Germany, or whoever, or even Americans would have to shoot down Russian planes over Ukraine, which is a direct attack. And so that means that we get into the conflict ourselves, and there is a risk of escalation. So that's an actual risk of escalation where Russia could be legitimately saying, okay, well, now you're part of the conflict, we're going to bombard you as well, or try to take the Baltic state or whatever. So that's why the other countries have been quite not keen on giving the Ukraine this kind of wish, even if it's very likely to have that Zelensky knows perfectly that he will never get the no-fly zone, but he wants the next best thing. He's using that as a negotiation tool, so saying, okay, I want the no-fly zone, you don't want to give it to me? Okay, what do you give me in exchange? So that way you need to give me more weapons, better weapons, that sort of thing. So I think it's more the what he wants to do. Did I discuss the elephant in the EU room, the veto? No, actually we did not discuss the veto. That's true. Even if we discussed about the decision-making process in the context of defense, so that touch upon veto, but no, you're right, we did not discuss the veto in itself, even if given what she said on the decision making in defense, that she thinks that it's a big problem. I think that she's not a big fan of the veto power when it comes to foreign affairs and defense. You have a question for me. Conference of Future of Europe was advertised as being a one-off citizen initiative. Do you think it's been successful, and is it something that's going to be repeated? I will start by the second one. Is it going to be something that's going to be repeated? The Commission has already said that they were open to. I forgot. They had a marvelous EU speak kind of expression, like but basically they're open to make it something more common, not maybe not something permanent, but they say, okay, maybe we need something that allows citizens to have their say. So the commissioners already said that. Will it be something exactly like the conference on the future of Europe? I don't think so. It's quite heavy, so I don't think it would be something that they would do like that. But do I think it's been successful? Well, we'll have to see, for starters, because it depends. It will depend on what the council does, on whether the proposal of citizens are applied, and that means that I expect that it would require a number of treaty changes. So will the member state be open to make treaty changes because of the Conference on Future of Europe? I'm not certain, and we know that since the beginning of the Conference on Future of Europe, we know that the council has been going in there very, very reluctantly, and I don't see them reopening the treaties because the Conference of Future of Europe is saying. Beyond that, I haven't looked at the proposals of the citizens panels, so I can't judge the ideas that they made, whether they are realistic or not. So on that, we'll discover that together whenever I do the streams in a few weeks about the proposals of the citizen panel. But you have an argument. I mean, you could make an argument questioning the legitimacy of these proposals, because one thing that is for sure is that the Conference on Future of Europe failed to gather crowds. That's clear. Like when you look at the online portal that they made for the Conference of Future of Europe, we already made a stream about that. I think a month ago or something. There was not that many people interested in participating in that. It was mostly. It was a bit of a circle jerk. It was the Federalists, it was the lobbies, it was the entire EU people. So it was not like the regular Joe going to participate to the Conference on Future of Europe. So you could say, well, can we consider these ideas that are pushed forward by the Conference on Future of Europe to be legitimate to be a legitimate and actual representation of what citizens think, because the wide majority of citizens did not participate to the process. So the composition of the panel was done to be as representative as possible, but still, that there is a core issue there, because you can't say that it was a popular success. So that will play definitely against the conference. Then it depends of the council and actually of the ideas. If the citizens panel came up with ideas that are completely unrealistic, that will not help the case of the Conference of Future of Europe. But for that, we'll see during the stream whether those were interesting and good ideas or not. Anyway, I think I finished ranting on my side, so I'm going to conclude, unless you have burning questions to ask. So thank you for coming over. That was a pretty interesting interview again. She was unusual for a green, I would say, and that's appreciated. I mean, it's not often we hear the green perspective on defense and foreign affairs, so it was refreshing. I will see you next on Sunday for the news review, as usual, at 6 in French and at 8 in English. And next week we will have more interviews, but I will tell you more about that on Sunday. I don't want to tease things too early. But anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, don't hesitate to follow me on Twitch, of course, on YouTube, and also on my other social media. You can see the links in the chat. Did I mess that up? I may have messed that up. No, okay, the link appears. So follow me on Twitter, Discord, all the good things. That's where things are happening. Of course, if you really enjoy what you saw, you can toss a coin to your streamer via Coffee. You have the link in chat and on screen. And on this note, and I'm not going to take offense at the no brains butchering my name. But yeah, on this note, I wish you a good evening and a good weekend, and I hope to see you all on Sunday. Have a good one, guys. See you.